Forgiveness is one of the hardest things for the human heart. It is easy to ask for mercy, but far more difficult to give it. In the Bible, Jesus told a powerful parable, the story meant to challenge how we forgive, why we forgive, and what happens when we refuse to show mercy. This is the parable of the unmerciful servant. One day, Peter came to Jesus with an honest question. "Lord," he asked, "how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me?" Up to 7 times. 7 times sounded generous. It sounded patient. It sounded fair. But Jesus replied with words that stretched the limits of human kindness. "Not 7 times," he said, "but 77 times. Then Jesus told a story that would reveal what true forgiveness really means. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants." Picture a powerful king seated on his throne. His kingdom is vast, his authority absolute. Servants are brought before him one by one to give account of what they owe. Then one servant is brought in. This man owes the king 10,000 talents. An impossible amount. A debt so massive it could take several lifetimes to repay. A burden he could never escape. The king orders justice. The man, his wife, his children, and everything he owns are to be sold to repay the debt. The servant collapses to the ground. With desperation in his voice, he cries out, "Please, be patient with me, and I will pay back everything." But everyone knows the truth. He never could. Then something unexpected happens. The king looks at the servant not with anger, but with compassion, moved by mercy. The king cancels the entire debt, not part of it, not most of it, all of it. The servant is forgiven, freed, and sent away with a clean slate. The forgiven servant walks out of the palace free from a debt he could never repay. But instead of gratitude filling his heart, something darker takes hold. He finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 denarii, a small, manageable amount. The forgiven servant grabs him by the throat and demands, "Pay back what you owe me." The fellow servant falls to his knees. Using the very same words spoken before the king, he pleads, "Be patient with me, and I will pay it back." But there is no mercy, no compassion, no remembrance of the forgiveness just received. The unmerciful servant refuses and has the man thrown into prison until the debt is paid. Other servants see what happens, and they are deeply troubled. They go to the king and tell him everything. The king summons the forgiven servant back into his presence. This time, there is no compassion in the king's voice. "You wicked servant," he says. "I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" The room grows silent. In anger, the king hands him over to the jailers to be punished until he can repay a debt that can never truly be paid. Jesus ends the parable with a sobering truth. "This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart." These words land heavily. They remind us that forgiveness is not about words alone, it must come from the heart. This parable is not about money. The king represents God. The enormous debt represents our sin, a debt we could never repay on our own. The servant represents anyone who has received God's mercy but refuses to extend it to others. Jesus teaches that when we truly understand how much we have been forgiven, we cannot withhold forgiveness from those who hurt us. To receive mercy and refuse to give it is to misunderstand mercy entirely. Forgiveness is not easy, but it is the language of God's kingdom. We forgive not because others deserve it, but because we have been forgiven far more than we could ever repay.